Imagine, if you will, a navigation system that makes our modern multi-billion-dollar satellite networks look, well, utterly basic.
Right.
Or try to picture an agricultural society that was perfectly cultivating crops millions of years before the very first human ever decided to plant a seed.
Oh, wow.
Or, how about architectural wonders, structurally perfect cities, built entirely in the pitch black without a single blueprint?
I mean, it sounds like science fiction. Or maybe some highly advanced, undiscovered alien civilization operating in secret.
It really does. But as we were looking through this fascinating stack of research and notes you sent us for this deep dive, it became clear that this is actually happening right now, like right outside your window and beneath your feet.
Absolutely.
So our mission today is to explore the astonishing world of birds and insects as they're mentioned in the Quran. We're looking specifically at the sources you provided regarding the hoopoe, the bees, the ants, the spiders, and, well, those absolute masters of the sky.
And we should mention we have to skip a lot of the human stuff today.
Exactly. We are deliberately leaving all those incredible human historical achievements mentioned in your notes, the scholars, the inventors, the medical pioneers. We're leaving all of that for another time.
Right, there's just too much there.
Yeah. Today, we're focusing entirely on these tiny marvels of the natural world. So, okay, let's unpack this, because what your sources map out is this bridge between a 1,400-year-old scriptural text and cutting-edge modern science.
It's a huge bridge. Yeah.
The Quran points to these creatures not just as background scenery, but as ayahs, which translates to signs meant to be actively observed and reflected upon.
And that framing changes everything about how we approach this material. What's fascinating here is that what we find in your notes isn't just an inventory of what these creatures do. It's a profound inquiry into why they do it.
Right.
For centuries, humans mostly just watched animals, perhaps, taking their abilities for granted. But as we comb through the modern entomology and biology you provided, it becomes obvious that modern science is only just now catching up.
Catching up to texts from centuries ago, which is wild.
Exactly. It's a shift from merely observing an animal to recognizing an incredibly sophisticated mechanism at work.
So to start our exploration, we really have to begin by looking up, because before we can even begin to understand the complex societies built on the ground, we have to examine the ultimate individual travelers, right? Birds.
Oh, the birds. Yes.
The data in your sources regarding avian flight and migration is just staggering. I mean, we all know birds fly, but I don't think most of us grasp the sheer scale of the biology involved. Walk me through some of those statistics you pulled from the research.
Well, the scale is almost incomprehensible when you consider the size of the organism. Let's take the Arctic tern.
Okay.
This is a bird that weighs less than a handful of coins. Yet it performs the longest migration known among animals, traveling from the Arctic to Antarctica and back every single year.
Every year.
Every single year. Over its lifetime, a single Arctic tern will travel a distance roughly equivalent to flying from the Earth to the Moon and back, several times over.
That seems physically impossible for something that light. How does it even process enough energy to survive that?
Well, that brings us to the mechanics of it. They aren't just, gliding on a gentle breeze. Consider the bar-headed goose, which is another bird highlighted in the sources.
Right.
It flies straight over the Himalayas, reaching altitudes over 7,000 meters.
Wait, 7,000 meters?
It is a height where human climbers require supplemental oxygen just to stay conscious, let alone engage in the intense physical exertion of flight.
Unbelievable.
And modern science has mapped out the biological mechanism that allows this. Birds possess a completely unique respiratory system.
How does it differ from ours?
Instead of lungs that merely expand and contract like ours, mixing fresh and stale air, birds have a system of specialized air sacs. It requires 2 full inhalation and exhalation cycles to move a single breath through their system.
Interesting.
Which creates a continuous one-way flow of fresh, oxygen-rich air over their lung surfaces at all times.
Oh, I see. So they are constantly extracting maximum oxygen, whether they're breathing in or breathing out.
Exactly. And their navigation is even more complex than their respiration. Science has discovered that many migratory birds have tiny, naturally occurring magnetite crystals embedded in their tissues.
Magnetite, like tiny magnets.
Yes, like tiny magnets. These crystals physically interact with the Earth's magnetic field lines. The bird is essentially operating with a built-in biological compass that allows it to feel or perhaps even see the magnetic inclination of the planet to find true north.
See, I always try to visualize this by thinking of a human pilot flying a transatlantic route.
Right, yeah.
A human pilot relies on a massive dashboard, satellite radar, GPS, communication towers. A migrating bird is essentially doing the exact same thing, but its biological dashboard is simultaneously reading the position of the sun, mapping the stars at night, detecting polarized light that human eyes can't even perceive.
All at the same time.
Yeah, and reading the Earth's magnetic field, and all of that deeply complex data is being processed in real time by a brain the size of a pea. I mean, it is absurdly brilliant engineering.
Which brings us back to the scripture you asked us to look at. The 67th chapter of the Quran, verse 19 asks, "Do they not see the birds above them spreading and folding their wings? None holds them up except the most merciful."
Oh, wow.
Modern science has spent decades answering the mechanism of that flight. You know, the hollow bones, the one-way air sacs, the magnetite. But the Quran is asking the reader to ponder the meaning.
The meaning behind it all.
Exactly. Who established the laws of aerodynamics? Who programmed that tiny brain with such a flawlessly advanced navigation system before the bird ever took its first flight out of the nest?
And the texts you provided, they don't just focus on the physical mechanics of birds, they focus on their historical and spiritual roles too.
There is absolutely a recurring theme across your sources that profound outcomes often emerge from the smallest, seemingly insignificant creatures.
Yeah, like the hoopoe bird.
Right. In the story of Prophet Solomon, the hoopoe isn't just a prop in the background. It acts as a crucial messenger.
It's an active participant.
Yes. It gathers intelligence, crosses vast distances alone, and delivers critical information about the kingdom of Sheba. It carries knowledge.
The spider at the cave of Thar is another perfect example of that. During the Hijra, which was the migration of Prophet Muhammad and his companion Abu Bakr, they were hiding in a cave, actively being hunted by their enemies.
A very dangerous situation.
Right, and what protected them wasn't an armed guard or a structurally blocked entrance. A spider spun a web across the cave opening, and a dove built a nest right there.
It's so simple but so effective.
Exactly. The pursuers saw the unbroken web and the undisturbed bird and simply assumed no one could possibly be inside.
That perfectly illustrates the synthesis we are seeing. Absolute protection and profound historical shifts pivoting on the actions of fragile creatures.
Yeah.
Furthermore, birds in Islamic tradition are the ultimate symbol of tawakkul, which translates to profound trust or reliance.
Trusting the process, basically.
More than that, trusting the divine. Your notes mentioned a saying of the prophet that if people truly relied on the divine, they would be provided for like the birds. A bird doesn't have a savings account.
No 401k for the bird.
Right. It doesn't have a warehouse of food. It leaves its nest every single morning completely hungry with zero material guarantees.
But the key part of that lesson, I think, is that the bird doesn't just sit in the nest waiting for a worm to drop into its beak.
No, it has to work for it.
It flies out into the unknown. It puts in the grueling physical effort, it searches, and it returns full. It represents the perfect intersection of taking action and having trust.
Which naturally leads us to a fascinating question.
Okay, let's hear it.
If birds demonstrate this miracle of individual navigation across the wide open sunlit sky, how does nature organize itself in tight, pitch-black confined spaces?
I see where you're going with this.
We are moving from the individual mastery of the sky to the collective genius of the hive.
The bees. Here's where the stack of notes you sent us gets really interesting. I mean, I knew bees made honey, obviously, but I had no idea about the structural and linguistic depths here.
It's genuinely surprising.
Walk us through what the Quran actually says about the bee.
So in the Quran, there's an entire chapter named after the bee, Surah An-Nahl. Verse 68 says, "And your Lord inspired the bee. Take for yourself dwellings in the mountains, among the trees, and in what people build, then eat from all the fruits."
Okay, beautiful imagery.
It is. Now, the fascinating linguistic secret buried in the 7th century Arabic text is that the verbs used to address the bees, the commands to take dwellings and eat from fruits, they are grammatically feminine.
I found that detail absolutely wild when I read your notes, because for most of human history, people, including brilliant philosophers like Aristotle, they just assumed the bees out gathering nectar were male soldiers.
Right, the whole king bee theory.
Yeah, that the ruler of the hive was a king bee.
It wasn't until modern entomology developed that scientists confirmed the biological reality. The worker bees, the ones performing all these exact tasks of building the hive, foraging, and gathering the nectar, They are entirely female.
Which is it's a tiny, incredibly specific linguistic detail in the text that perfectly mirrors a biological reality discovered centuries later.
Exactly.
But I do want to push back on one thing regarding their architecture, because we always hear nature documentaries raving about the honeycomb.
Oh, the famous hexagons.
Everyone praises the hexagonal structure, but are hexagons really that miraculous? I mean, humans build storage units with squares and right angles for a reason. They stack easily.
That's a fair point.
Right. Like, why wouldn't a bee just build square cells or circular ones? Is the hexagon really an engineering marvel or just a biological quirk?
Oh, it is an absolute engineering marvel. In fact, mathematicians debated your exact question for centuries.
Yeah.
It is actually known as the honeycomb conjecture.
Wait, really? A whole conjecture just for the bees?
Yes. Think about the geometry here. If the bees built circular cells, you would have empty, wasted gaps between every single circle. It's wildly inefficient space.
Okay, sure. But what about squares?
If they built squares or triangles, those shapes do fit together perfectly without gaps. But there is a catch. Wax is incredibly resource-intensive for a bee to produce.
How intensive are we talking?
It takes a bee consuming about 8 ounces of honey to produce just 1 ounce of wax from its own glands.
Oh, wow. So they are operating on a very strict biological budget.
A very strict budget. So in 1999, a mathematician finally proved what the bees already instinctively knew. Out of all possible geometric shapes that tile together seamlessly, the hexagon has the smallest total perimeter.
Meaning less wax is needed.
Exactly. This means the hexagon is the absolute perfect mathematical shape to store the maximum volume of honey, using the absolute minimum amount of wax. They are solving complex optimization problems in the dark.
Doing masterclass engineering without ever taking a geometry class.
Precisely.
And the way they communicate how to fill those hexagons is just as wild. The waggle dance.
Ah, yes, the waggle dance. Discovered by the scientist Carl von Frisch, who actually won a Nobel Prize for deciphering it.
A Nobel Prize for watching bees dance? I love it.
It was well deserved. When a female forager bee finds a highly productive flower patch, she returns to the dark, crowded hive and performs a specific figure-8 movement on the vertical honeycomb.
But how does a dance in the pitch black of a hive communicate directions to a flower miles away?
She is essentially sharing a highly complex dynamic map. During the straight part of the figure-8, which is called the waggle run, the angle she dances at relative to the vertical line of the honeycomb perfectly corresponds to the angle of the food source relative to the sun outside.
So wait, she's using gravity inside the hive as a stand-in for the sun's position outside?
Yes, she uses gravity inside the hive to map the sun outside. Furthermore, the duration of that waggle run tells the other bees exactly how far away the target is.
Unbelievable.
And it gets better. The more vigorously she dances, the higher the concentration of sugar in the nectar. She is conveying distance, solar direction, and quality, all through physical vibration in total darkness.
It is just mind-blowing. A brain smaller than a sesame seed is constantly calculating solar angles, compensating for the movement of the sun over time, and translating all of that into a physical vibration.
It's nature's GPS.
And for the listener who sent this in, I want you to think about what this means on a practical level. A bee works its entire, very short life for the benefit of a colony it will never rule. As the texts point out, they transform this gathered nectar into honey, which the Qur'an specifically notes has healing for people.
And modern pharmacological research backs that up entirely. We know honey has powerful antibacterial properties, antioxidants, and anti-inflammatory effects.
Like medical-grade honey, right?
Exactly. Due to its unique osmotic properties and hydrogen peroxide content, medical-grade honey is actively used in modern hospitals today to treat severe burns and wounds that resist standard antibiotics.
So a bee consumes far less than it contributes. It pollinates the plants that literally feed the global ecosystem, and it leaves behind a substance that heals. It's a profound lesson in leaving goodness wherever you go.
It really is. And, if bees are the master architects of the air and the trees, your sources show there is an even older and arguably vaster civilization operating right beneath our feet.
Transitioning from the flying superorganisms to the subterranean empires.
The ants.
The ants. Now, in the Quran, there's an entire chapter dedicated to the ants, Surah An-Naml. There's a story there that really caught my eye. Prophet Suleiman is marching with his massive, formidable army, and they approach a valley of ants.
Right, and the text describes a scenario where a single ant recognizes the encroaching danger and actively speaks out, warning its community.
Warning them to take cover.
Yes, it says, "O ants, enter your dwellings, lest Slimon and his soldiers crush you while they perceive not."
Wait, I have to ask, doesn't it seem like we're sort of anthropomorphizing a bug here?
How do you mean?
Does an ant really understand the nuance between intentional malice and, accidental harm? Like, while they perceive not, isn't it just a reflexive panic?
Well, it's a valid question, but let's look at what modern science tells us about swarm intelligence and threat assessment. Ants don't panic individually. They operate as a deeply connected network.
Okay.
When a threat is detected, ants release specific alarm pheromones. What's incredible is that they have different chemical signals for different types of threats.
Really?
Yes.
Huh.
A slow-moving, massive vibration, like a marching army or a herd of animals that might accidentally crush them, triggers a specific chemical command to evacuate and take cover deep underground.
Ah.
This is a very different response than the aggressive, swarming defense they would mount against an intentional predator invading their nest. They are actively categorizing the nature of the threat.
Okay, so it's all chemical communication. I like to think of their pheromone trails like Waze or, any crowdsourced traffic app.
That's a great analogy.
No single ant has a satellite map of the forest. But if an ant finds a food source, it drops a chemical trail on its way back. Other ants stumble on it and follow it, and if the food is good, they drop their own chemicals, reinforcing the trail.
And the genius of that system lies in the mathematics of evaporation.
Evaporation, how does that work?
Well, if a branch falls and blocks a highly trafficked ant trail, the ants scatter. The ones that happen to find the shortest way around the obstacle get back to the nest faster.
Okay, makes sense.
Because they complete the round trip quicker, they lay down more pheromones on that shorter route before the chemicals have time to evaporate. The longer routes lose their scent.
Oh. Instantly, the entire colony's traffic naturally funnels to the most efficient path.
Exactly. The network itself acts as a massive distributed brain.
Which isn't just a quirky nature fact. In your notes, you highlighted that modern computer scientists use these exact ant colony optimization algorithms.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it's everywhere in tech.
Right. When you look at how telecommunications networks route our cell phone data packets, or how delivery fleets optimize millions of driving routes, they're frequently using mathematical models based entirely on how ants forage for food.
And the civilizations they build with that intelligence fundamentally challenge our definition of advanced behavior.
Like the leafcutters.
Yes, the sources you provided discuss leafcutter ants. For centuries, humans thought they were just stripping leaves to eat them.
They aren't eating them.
No, they aren't. They take those leaf fragments deep underground into specialized climate-controlled chambers. They chew the toxic leaves into a pulp and use them to cultivate a very specific type of fungus.
Wait, they are farming.
They are literally practicing agriculture, and it gets more complex. They actively weed out parasitic fungi that threaten their crop.
You're kidding?
I'm not. They carry specific Streptomyces bacteria on their own bodies, which produce natural antibiotics that they apply to their fungus gardens to keep them healthy. They have been managing subterranean, antibiotic-treated agricultural systems for millions of years before humans ever figured out how to plant a single seed.
And some species even raise livestock. I was reading in the notes, they find tiny insects called aphids, which secrete a sugary liquid called honeydew.
Yes, the ant herds.
The ants protect the aphids from predators like ladybugs. They herd them to the freshest plants, and in return, they gently stroke the aphids' antennas to milk them for the honeydew. I mean, it is straight up animal husbandry.
It really is. They build massive underground cities equipped with dedicated ventilation shafts to control CO2 levels, specific waste disposal areas, nurseries for their young, and royal chambers. It makes you look at the patch of dirt in your backyard with entirely new respect.
It really does. And there's a powerful leadership lesson embedded in that story of the ant in the Qur'an that you asked us to review.
The ant that warned the colony.
Exactly. Think about that single ant who felt the vibrations of Suleiman's army. It could have just slipped under a rock and saved itself, but it took responsibility. It stood its ground and broadcast a warning to the entire community.
That's true leadership.
It teaches us that leadership isn't about giving orders from a throne. It's about foresight, assessing risk, and taking immediate action for the collective good of the community.
And ants do not boast about their individual achievements. They serve the colony. Most of them will never be recognized or seen, but the massive superorganism thrives because of their unglamorous, consistent, dedicated contribution.
So what does this all mean for us? I mean, we've gone from the biologically embedded magnetic compass of a migrating Arctic tern to the mathematically flawless solar-navigated waggle dance of the female worker bee, all the way down to the pheromone-driven, fungus-farming superhighways of the ants.
It's a lot to take in.
It is. And in every single case, cutting-edge modern science is actively measuring the breathtaking mechanisms that the Qur'an urged humanity to simply observe and reflect upon over a millennium ago.
I think diving into the notes you provided leaves us with a deeply humbling realization.
What's that?
There is a specific verse you highlighted, Quran 6:38, which states that there is no creature on earth, nor bird that flies with its wings, except that they are communities like you.
Communities like you.
Exactly. If these tiny insects and birds practice organized agriculture, if they possess advanced chemical communication networks, if they demonstrate the situational awareness to warn each other of danger, and build mathematically perfect structures entirely in the dark, well, it completely shatters our human-centric view of the world.
We really do tend to think of ourselves as the solitary pinnacle of intelligent society on this planet.
We do.
But perhaps we are just one intelligent society living on a globe absolutely crowded with other highly advanced, incredibly sophisticated non-human nations.
Nations of the sky, nations of the hive, nations of the soil.
And we simply step over them every single day without realizing the profound engineering and wisdom operating right beneath our shoes.
It changes your whole perspective.
What an incredible thought to end on. To the listener who sent in this stack of research, thank you. The next time you see a bird cross the sky, or a bee land on a flower, or an ant carrying a crumb across the pavement, don't just look past it.
Take a second.
Yes, take a second. Observe the tiny signs in your own backyard. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep looking up and keep looking closely.